At 1 a.m., the deadbolt eased like it was being persuaded by an old friend, the kind of soft metallic sigh you only hear when the key belongs there. I lay still on my side of the bed with my eyes open in the dark, counting the heartbeats in my ears and the faint hum of the box fan, and then I heard her whisper, almost a breath against the hall, "He'll never notice." That sentence slid under the door before the door even opened. I could smell rain on the cottonwoods and the ghost of her perfume, something new and powdery with a citrus bite she'd never worn in the 6 years we'd been married. The hinge gave a careful creak, then a pause, and then a second sound answered her, a low male voice that didn't belong in my house, in my marriage, in my life. A chuckle like he was in on a joke I hadn't been told. I didn't move. I didn't clear my throat. I stared at the blue LED on the cable box in the living room, through the at-anchor hush of our little ranch in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, and counted the steps that had always belonged to us. It should have been another night where the dog snored and I worried about payroll at the shop, where I rolled over and tucked my feet into the warm canyon her legs left. Instead, the hall breathed strangers. Let me rewind before that key turned, before the whisper and the answering voice braided the night and unbraided my life. My name's Mason, 33. I run a small two-bay auto shop off Main, next to a strip center with a Subway on one end and a vape place on the other. I grew up an hour south, the son of a drywall hanger and a mom who did night shifts at the Kroger bakery. I'm the guy who keeps his receipts in a shoebox and still changes his own oil on Saturdays with a cold Bud Light sweating on the driveway. I met Leah on a Thursday at a Buckeyes watch party at O'Malley's, the kind of place where the wings are too dry unless you get them swimming, and there's a framed photo of some guy who bowled a perfect game in '94. She wore a red hoodie she cut the neck out of and a ponytail with that little flyaway halo that always gets me. I told her she chewed her straw like she was trying to intimidate it. She laughed and said I wore my ball cap like a high school coach who never got over the playoffs. First date was pie at Nancy's Diner, chrome napkin holders, and a waitress who calls everyone honey, whether they're 12 or 80. We split a slice of cherry like teenagers at a drive-in. We did the things people post about, Hocking Hills in fall, her hair a copper ribbon against hemlocks, a July cookout where I fell in love with the idea of us while a kid from down the block launched bottle rockets too close to his dad's truck, a road trip in my old Silverado, bench seat and no AC where we counted billboards and rolled into Nashville with our forearms sunburnt and our thumbs sticky from gas station peach rings. When I proposed, it was at a cheap motel south of Gatlinburg, with a room that smelled like chlorine and hope. I hid the ring under a styrofoam cup and wrote, "Do not touch, Science Project," in Sharpie, because I'm an idiot who thinks he's clever. She cried and said yes and then made me promise we'd always be real, which at the time meant we'd talk about the hard stuff and not keep score. We bought the little ranch with the sagging gutters because of the backyard maple and the way the morning light washed the kitchen like milk. We did Target runs and fought about shower curtains and made up over pancakes. On Sundays, we grilled brats and let the Browns ruin our afternoons. For a while, it was easy. For a while, she called me my guy and kissed the chipped knuckle I can't seem to stop re-splitting at work. But if you've ever watched a windshield crack spread spider-thin from a pea-sized chip, you know how fast "for a while" runs out. It started small, so small I'm sure people reading this will say, "You should have seen it then." But I promise you, love is loud and trouble whispers. Leah joined a new Pilates studio with a neon sign in the window that said, "Longer, leaner, stronger." She switched perfumes, said her friend Kayla turned her onto it, said it was more grown woman. As she started setting her phone face down on the counter, claiming the lock button was sticky and the screen would stay on and burn in images, she laughed more at her phone than at me. At night, she'd scroll with her back to me, her shoulders glowing blue, and when I reached for her, she'd say she was sore from Reformer or too full from dinner or just needed to sleep. The old Leah used to send me pictures of the sky or a weird sign at the grocery. The new Leah sent me screenshots of workout streaks and occasionally a selfie where the brows were sharper than I remembered, and the captions came with 3 fire emojis instead of the heart. Like, love was now a reaction button she could choose. I told myself we were tired, that I'd been putting in long hours because the shop's new alignment rack financed at a rate that made me sweaty, that she was entitled to a hobby, that women evolve, and a good man lets them. Then there were the little scheduling fractures, a girls' night that stretched to midnight with no Uber receipts, a spontaneous Sunday walk that required eyeliner and boots with a heel. She bought a second gym bag and left it by the front door like a guest's suitcase, and sometimes it smelled like fabric softener I didn't buy. There was a brand new toothbrush that lived in that gym bag. Kayla, whoever she was, became a character in our days. Kayla is going through a divorce. Kayla needs me tonight. Kayla swears this place has the best tacos. I never met Kayla, though I learned her name like a password that granted Leah exit from our ordinary. I kept making breakfast. I kept paying the mortgage. We were still us, I told myself. Only in a chapter where we didn't narrate everything out loud. But I started noticing timing. On Tuesdays, Leah's late class ended at 8:30. Yet she'd drift home at 10:15 with strands of hair damp not with sweat, but with the kind of shower sheen that doesn't match the studio's tiny bathroom. She smelled like hotel soap, generic, almondy. One night, washing dishes, I saw a charge on the Capital One app, the Shady Maple Inn. It sounded like a place Scooby-Doo would get a clue. The amount, $62.48, looked like a room between cleaners. I told myself we'd use the card to book a room for her cousin's wedding months back. And maybe they ran it late, but the date was that day. I didn't say anything. Instead, I went to Walmart and bought a stack of legal pads and a pack of Bic pens, and I wrote the date and time across the top like I was starting a new job. I began keeping score. There's a quiet you learn working with engines. The way a misfire at idle can be hidden by a heavy foot on the highway. I started listening for the marriage misfire. I noted late home 10:12 p.m., hair wet, bag smells like almonds, phone face down, new lock screen, no more us at the State Fair Ferris wheel, deleted text thread with Kayla. I'm not proud of snooping, but I am proud I didn't scream. I wanted to know before I burned the house down. I watched for gas receipts. She stopped leaving her purse on the counter. I checked the trash. She started taking it out as a favor. She didn't know I know our trash schedule like scripture. I found a folded napkin from a place across town I'd never heard of, the bent spoon, wiped lipstick half moon on it, and a phone number written in blocky, left-leaning script. I put the napkin in a manila folder and felt crazy even as I did it. The dog, Ranger, a rescue with one ear that flops, started greeting her with a confused wag, like he had to be convinced it was his person. One Thursday, a stranger called the shop and hung up when I answered. I star 69 like it was 99. The number belonged to a prepaid plan. In the waiting room, ESPN yammered about the draft while a man in coveralls watched me with the gentle pity you give a guy who doesn't know his fly's been down for a while. I told myself I was imagining everything. Then came the Apple thing. My laptop at the counter synced iMessages by accident, something about me updating the OS and clicking the wrong box. Suddenly a shower of blue and gray bubbles from Leah's phone bled into my screen between invoices. Most of it was harmless, the kind of chatter any 30-something woman fires into group chats. Memes, a TikTok of a raccoon stealing cat food, a rant about a coworker who kept stealing her yogurt. But there was a thread with a single contact named K. The tone was velvet, compliments that came wrapped in inside jokes. Last night still in my head. Counting down to Tuesday. A photo of two glasses sweating on a laminate nightstand with an old hotel Bible peeking out of the drawer like a witness. I didn't click the attachments. I stared at the dots when they appeared and felt my hands go quiet. That night, I grilled brats and poured Leah a Bud Light, and she took one absent-minded sip and said, "I'm actually doing dry till Labor Day." And the can sweated untouched beside her as she scrolled. She laughed at something and turned the screen away like the sun. I asked, easy as I could, "How's Kayla's divorce?" She blinked, confused for a millisecond, then said, "Messy," like she'd practiced it. I kissed her temple and tasted the unfamiliar perfume and thought about that shoebox of receipts downstairs, the ones that prove where a man has been and what he has paid for, and I felt the old promise, be real, rattle like a hubcap on a rutted road. The next Tuesday I closed early for inventory, which meant I parked the Silverado 3 houses down from the Shady Maple Inn and watched couples' lives, small, dumb, borrowed lives between the click of a door and the hum of the wall unit. A gray sedan slid in around 7:42. Leah stepped out in a denim jacket and a black dress I'd never seen, hair in a loose knot that looked messy in a way you plan. She didn't look left or right. She walked like someone who knew exactly which door was hers. I didn't follow. I wrote the room number on a napkin, 214. I went home and fed the dog and watered the ficus and stood in the quiet of a house that could hold a whole life, and also absolutely nothing. I washed my hands twice to get the almond smell off from handling her gym bag earlier, Yes, I had looked. Yes, there was a tiny travel bottle of conditioner from a brand I can't pronounce. Yes, it made me feel like I was stealing from my own fridge. I put a clean sheet on the bed because I needed one thing untouched. I set my phone face up on the nightstand and watched the screen. Nothing came. She walked in at 10:26 with the kind of glow you can't explain with Pilates. She kissed my cheek and said, "You're up," like she'd stumbled onto a stranger. I said, "Just couldn't sleep." I looked at her and saw both the girl in the red hoodie and a woman I hadn't been introduced to. She showered and hummed a song I didn't know and came to bed and turned away and was asleep in 4 minutes. I lay there and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house settle like a tired old man getting comfortable. Wednesday, I bought a small spiral-bound notebook, black cover, fits in a back pocket, and wrote Project Real on the front because naming something makes it less likely to float away. I didn't plan revenge, I planned clarity. I started wearing my wedding band on a chain under my shirt because the metal on my finger felt like a promise someone else had pawned. On Friday, I found a second house key missing from the hook by the mudroom door. Leah said she gave it to Kayla because she might need to borrow the air fryer. I pictured my kitchen being pilfered by a woman I'd never seen, and my heart went cold in a very specific, contained way, like a mechanic tapping a seized bolt and saying, "There it is." Sunday night, she said she was running to Kroger for oat milk at 11:40 p.m. Who needs oat milk at midnight? She came back smelling like rain and citrus and looking like she'd run a relay under streetlights. That brings me to tonight, to 1 o'clock a.m., to the soft persuasion of a key in a lock that was supposed to be ours, to a whisper that assumed my ignorance, to the second voice that answered like they were in our own private joke. And here is the part that made the hair lift along my arms. When the man answered, I didn't just hear a stranger. I recognized the cadence, the lazy confidence, a voice I'd heard every Sunday from my own back porch. The second voice in my hallway that night belonged to Mark, our neighbor, the guy who lived 2 doors down with a yellow lab and a yard he mowed in perfectly straight lines. I recognized him before I even processed what it meant. His lazy drawl, the way he clipped his vowels like he was half joking with the world. For years, Mark had been the guy I tossed a football with over the fence, the one who borrowed my socket set and returned it late, but with a six-pack as apology. Hearing him inside my house at 1 a.m, answering my wife's whisper, froze me harder than any threat of violence. I didn't storm out of the bedroom. I stayed still, memorizing the rhythm of their steps, the quick hush of their voices, the faint thud of a gym bag dropped on hardwood. They moved down the hall toward the kitchen, and I pictured Leah pointing out where we kept the oat milk, the air fryer, the life I'd built with her like it was a showroom for another man to browse. The next morning, she was back in yoga pants with her hair in a messy bun, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. Ranger, the dog, circled her cautiously, sniffing her legs. I wanted to scream, "I heard him. I know it was Mark," but instead I buttered toast and asked if she wanted 1 slice or 2. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She flipped its screen down without looking, saying, "Work email." I knew better. That week I became a collector of shadows. I checked the Capital One app twice a day. Tuesday evening showed a charge at the Bent Spoon, the same name scribbled on the lipstick napkin I'd found. Wednesday, there was a $48.90 charge at Econo Lodge East. Thursday, a $27 gas receipt stuffed behind her visor, the mileage not adding up to her so-called studio sessions. I wrote it all in the notebook, labeled Project Real. Dates, times, amounts, locations, my ledger of betrayal. Each entry felt like tightening lug nuts on a wheel, securing the truth before it could wobble away. I started following her, not in the dramatic Hollywood way, but in the small-town Ohio way. Parking the Silverado 2 rows back at Kroger, trailing her to the far corner where she never bought groceries, but always emerged 40 minutes later with a single carton of oat milk and a glow that milk couldn't provide. Once, I watched her pull into the lot of a Comfort Inn, text for a few minutes, then get out and slip into the lobby. I waited. 25 minutes later, Mark's gray sedan rolled in. He didn't look around. He walked inside like he had a reservation in more ways than one. I took photos with my phone, blurry through the windshield, but enough. Leah's jacket, Mark's ball cap, the door to room 307 closing behind them. I felt my throat burn, not with tears, but with that mechanical mix of rage and clarity, like when a seized engine finally breaks loose under torque. I drove home, sat at the kitchen table, and laid out my evidence. Napkin, receipt, screenshots of Capital One charges, and now photos. I wasn't imagining this. At night, I checked the iMessage sync on my shop laptop again. The thread with Kay had new messages. Can't stop thinking about last night. You're better than I dreamed. Then one that nailed it down. Love the way you keep it quiet walking past his room. That line almost buckled me. Not just the cheating, but the detail of them laughing at my ignorance. The choreography of betrayal practiced in my own hallway. Still, I didn't confront her. I wanted the moment to be undeniable. The kind of truth no one could gaslight away. I bought a $20 voice recorder off Amazon and taped it under the lip of our hallway console table. The first night, nothing. The second night, the recording caught her coming in late, whispering, "Shh, he's asleep." Mark muttered, "Relax, I parked 2 streets over." Then the unmistakable sound of them kissing in the dark, while my dog whined softly in the background. I listened to it 3 times, each play like sandpaper on my chest. I copied the file to a USB stick and locked it in the glove box of the Silverado. I printed a transcript and slipped it into the manila folder with the photos and receipts. This was no longer suspicion, it was evidence. Ironclad, dated, timed, preserved. Leah's behavior grew sloppier. One Friday, she said she was spending the night at Kayla's. I checked her location on Find My iPhone, something she must have forgotten I had access to. The blue dot hovered not at Kayla's supposed address, but at the Shady Maple Inn, room 214 again. I screenshotted it. At 2:14 a.m., I drove over, parked across the street, and watched the curtain glow from the flicker of a muted TV. I didn't need to see more. Saturday morning, Leah stumbled in wearing a hoodie that wasn't hers. Gray, XL, the kind of thing Mark wore to mow. She tossed it into the laundry hamper without a thought. I fished it out when she showered, snapped a photo of the tag, and put it back. Ranger sniffed it, then backed away with his tail down. Even the dog knew. By now, my manila folder bulged with proof. Receipts, photos, transcripts, screenshots, a hoodie. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an investigator building a case file. Each piece of paper weighed like steel in my hands. Proof that love could be dismantled and cataloged. And yet, through all of it, I kept my mask on. At breakfast, I asked if she wanted syrup. At night, I kissed her cheek goodnight. I let her think the act held, that I was still in the dark. Because I wanted the reveal to matter, to land with the force of a gavel, not a slap. The last entry in my notebook for that week reads, 1:07 a.m., heard Key, whisper, "He'll never notice." Male voice answered, confirmed, Mark. I circled it 3 times in red ink. That was the moment suspicion hardened into steel. And that's when I knew the confrontation was coming. The day of the confrontation came faster than I expected, like a runaway truck on a downhill stretch. My manila folder was thick enough to break the clasp, my USB drive sat cold in the Silverado's glove box, and my stomach carried the weight of 2 weeks of sleepless nights. I decided I wasn't going to let this rot quietly behind closed doors. No, this needed air, witnesses, a setting where lies collapse under the glare of normal life. So I chose Sunday afternoon, the one time Leah couldn't resist, the weekly neighborhood cookout in Mark's backyard. Hot dogs, Bud Lights, kids running with water guns, folding chairs arranged around a fire pit even in July. It was perfect. Ordinary enough to feel safe, public enough to make truth undeniable. I showed up with a tray of ribs, the kind that fall apart if you just breathe on them, and nodded at the crowd like nothing was different. Leah walked next to me in a sundress, hair braided, looking like a summer postcard. She kissed my cheek in front of everyone, a stage move, her smile wide and hollow. Mark was manning the grill in cargo shorts, spatula in hand, calling out, "Mason, my man!" like he hadn't been in my hallway whispering in the dark. My fists clenched around the aluminum tray until the corners cut into my palm. I waited. I let them relax into the hum of chatter, the crack of beer cans, the sizzle of burgers. Leah and Mark drifted close, their shoulders brushing in ways subtle enough most people wouldn't notice. But I noticed, every damn twitch. And when I saw her hand linger just a second too long on his arm, I knew it was time. I walked to the center of the yard, set down my ribs on the picnic table, and cleared my throat loud enough that heads turned. "Hey neighbors," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "I've got something to share." Leah's smile froze. Mark looked at me with the same lazy confidence he used when bragging about his fantasy football team. I pulled the manila folder from my backpack and laid it open on the table, like I was presenting blueprints. Photos slid out. The blurry shots of Leah entering the motel, the charge slips, the transcript of the hallway recording. Conversations stilled. A kid dropped a popsicle, red syrup bleeding into the grass. Leah's face went white. "Mason, what are you—" she began, but I cut her off, my voice sharp as a wrench on steel. "You told him he'll never notice. At 1:07 a.m. in our house. And then Mark answered you. Should I play it?" I held up the USB stick like it was a detonator. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Mark laughed, a short, arrogant bark. "Man, you're making a fool of yourself." He tried to keep grilling, flipping a burger like nothing was happening, but the spatula shook in his hand. I pressed on. June 14th, Comfort Inn, room 307, June 22nd, Shady Maple Inn, room 214, Capital One charges, screenshots. Your hoodie, Mark. I pointed at Leah, then at him. You think I don't keep score? I'm a mechanic. I log every mile, every part, every drop of oil, and I logged every one of your lies. The crowd murmured. A woman whispered, "Oh my God, that's his wife?" Someone else pulled out a phone, already recording. Leah stepped forward, tears streaking her face, voice breaking. "Mason, please, not like this. We can talk." "Talk?" I asked, snapped. "You've been talking plenty, whispering in my hallway while I lay in bed, laughing at how blind I was. Now everybody knows the joke." Mark dropped the spatula and tried to step in front of her, puffing up like a man ready to fight. "You're pathetic, Mason. You think this makes you a hero? You're embarrassing yourself." I smiled coldly. "Funny. That's the same word on the receipt from the bent spoon. Embarrassing handwriting, left-leaning. You recognize it?" I slapped the napkin onto the table. He froze. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Neighbors shifted, watching. The lab at Mark's feet barked once, sharp, as if to punctuate the silence. Someone's beer tipped over, fizzing into the grass. Leah finally broke, sobbing, grabbing my arm. "Please, can we just go home?" Her grip was desperate, her nails digging crescents into my skin. I looked at her hand, then at her tear-streaked face, then at the people watching. People who'd seen us grill brats together, wave from the driveway, play cornhole on this same patch of grass. Now they saw us like this, broken open. I pulled my arm free. "Home," I said, my voice steady. "You already gave our home to someone else." Mark tried one last jab, muttering, "You'll regret this." I leaned in close enough for only him to hear, my words like steel on concrete. "No, Mark. You'll regret underestimating me." I turned back to the crowd. "I'm filing for divorce, tomorrow. And for anyone wondering if this is real, ask to hear the recording. I've got copies." A heavy silence hung for a beat, then whispers spread. Phones buzzed with texts. Leah covered her face. Mark slunk back toward the grill like he could hide behind smoke. The summer air felt different, charged, like before a storm. And as I walked out of that yard, leaving the ribs, the neighbors, the wreckage of two people who thought they could make me the fool, I knew the next chapter wasn't about evidence anymore. It was about aftermath. The morning after the cookout, the house felt like a courtroom. Leah sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, her phone face down as if burying it would change the truth. Ranger paced the floor, ears twitching at every shift in the silence. I brewed coffee the way I always did. 2 scoops of Maxwell House, splash of cream. But the ritual no longer belonged to us. It was just me, surviving the routine. I didn't yell, I didn't slam doors. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside, copies of the receipts, the photos, the transcripts, the USB stick. "This," I said, "is for the lawyer." Leah looked up, her eyes swollen from crying all night. "Mason, please," she whispered, voice raw. "We can work through this." "Work through it?" I almost laughed. "You worked through it with Mark, in my house, in my bed, and then you laughed about how I'd never notice." My tone wasn't rage. It was flat, cold, like a verdict already written. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "I'm done." That afternoon, I drove to the Franklin County Courthouse. The clerk stamped my petition for divorce with a thud that echoed louder in my chest than in the room. Final, official, paper over flesh. I walked out into the sunlight with my copy and felt lighter, like I'd set down a load I'd carried too long. News spread fast after the cookout. Neighbors looked at Leah differently. Conversations hushed when she passed. Mark's wife, because yes, he was married, packed her car within a week and left him standing in his perfect yard with his perfect lines and nothing but his lab for company. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Sometimes the wreckage speaks louder than revenge. At the house, Leah tried. She left notes on the fridge. Can we talk? I'm sorry. She cooked dinner, set the table, poured 2 glasses of wine. I ate standing at the counter, silent, pushing her food down without tasting it. Love once made me blind. Now clarity made me mute. She wept, begged, promised therapy, swore it meant nothing. But betrayal is arithmetic. 1 lie plus 1 lie equals 0 trust. There was no equation that added back up to us. The day she moved out, she took only a few bags. No fight over furniture, no tug of war over the TV. She paused in the doorway, eyes wet. You really won't even try? She asked. I shook my head. I already tried. For years. You threw it away. Ranger growled low, sensing her guilt. She left without hugging him. The screen door clicked shut with a finality no judge's gavel could match. The weeks after, I learned peace in small doses. A quiet breakfast with pancakes on a paper plate. Ranger curled at my feet on the porch while I sipped a Bud Light, the evening sun turning the yard gold. My niece drew me a crayon picture, stick figure Uncle Mason with a big smile, standing next to a floppy-eared dog. I tacked it on the fridge, right where Leah's notes used to be. I fixed up the Silverado, replaced the worn brake pads, gave it a polish till it gleamed like it hadn't in years. On Sundays, instead of grilling for 2, I watched the Browns alone with the sound low. The silence no longer heavy, but clean, like a garage after sweeping out the dust. People asked if I regretted airing it all at the cookout. I told them no. Sometimes the truth needs daylight, witnesses, the kind of moment no one can rewrite later. Leah and Mark can spin their stories however they want. But the neighborhood saw it, the receipts proved it, and I walked away free. I don't dream of revenge anymore. Revenge is heavy, and I've carried enough weight. What I found instead is peace. The kind that hums in a quiet house, in the clink of a coffee mug on the counter, in the wag of a dog's tail that never betrayed me. And if there's a moral, it's simple, American plain. Sometimes the trash takes itself out.